Hey friends, it's Amanda from Designs by Amanda K, and today I'm going to show you how you can make watercolor blended letterings with Tombow Dual Brush Pens. So you can get kind of the watercolor effect like in this piece here. Okay, let's start. So for this tutorial, I'm going to be using the Tombow Dual Brush Pens, and I'm going to be using pink and blue to keep it simple, but you can use any color you want. So one end has a brush tip, and the other end has a finer point felt tip. For this tutorial, we're going to be focusing on the brush tip. You'll also need a brush, and you can use just a regular watercolor brush, preferably a small tip, or you can use an actual water brush. I believe this is a Kuretake water brush, but also in a fine tip. The fine tip is what's going to help you get a little bit better control. You'll also need thick marker paper. I actually like the Canson marker paper. And then you'll need a jar of clean water and then a second jar for cleaning your brush with. And then I like to have a paper towel to dab my brush on. So those are the supplies you'll need to get started and learn how to make these fun watercolor blended letters. Okay, let's start. So I like to make a base first with a really pale gray. You could also use, like if you're using pink and blue like we are in this, you could also do a really pale pink as your base or a really pale blue, or you could use the lighter color that you're going to be doing in your final piece as the base. But this kind of gives you a layout of whatever word or letter that you're going to be doing. So I'm just going to write out the word blend with this really light gray. It's N95 if you want to know what color it is. Okay, so now that we've got that written out, now it is time to add our colors. So, like I mentioned, I'm going to be using a pink and a blue, and if you know your color wheel, you know that when you blend two colors like this, you'll get a purple. So, essentially, when we're finished, we'll have kind of three colors within our work. So, I'm actually going to start with the pink. So you can do this a few different ways. You can do start with a lighter color or one color on top that will bleed into the bottom color. You could do random splotches of colors that blend together, kind of like a galaxy effect. Or you could do, every stroke is a different color. It just depends on what you want the final piece to look like. So to keep it simple, I'm just going to do pink on top and blue on bottom, and then we'll blend them together. Okay, and when I add the blue on the bottom, I'm not going to bring it all the way up to the pink. I'm going to leave just a little bit of blank space to help with the blending. So I'm only going to bring it up to about here and just leave a little gap between the two colors. Okay, so now it's time to blend the two together, and this is where you will use your brush or your watercolor or your water pen and you'll just want to get your brush just a little bit wet. You don't want a lot of excess water, just enough to blend the two colors. And you'll start at the top, and I'm gonna go over all of the color so that it gets that watercolor effect, but I'm not going to really saturate it in water. But what I'm doing is bringing this pink down and meeting the blue, and that's when you'll get kind of that purple color here. Let's zoom in and I'll show you. So I'm bringing the pink down into the blue. Get a little extra water here. And see, when it meets the blue, you get that purple. So then what I like to do once I meet the two colors and you start to get that blend, then I'll work from the bottom up and bring the blue up to where it blends, so that way it softens it a bit, so it's not such a harsh line between the two colors. And then you'll just kind of play with it until you get the look that you're going for. So I don't know if you can see that okay, but so there's a nice soft blend between the two colors and it creates that purple look. So let's move on to this. So I'm starting with the pink and I'm bringing that down to meet the blue. And then when I switch between the pink and then from bringing the pink down to bringing the blue up, I like to rinse my brush off so that I'm not getting it too muddy. And you do have to work kind of fast when you're doing this because the ink will dry pretty quickly. See right there, I kind of messed up my connection when I was adding the colors in. But that's the beauty of this method, is that you can kind of correct any of the flaws that you made. Okay, I'm going to zoom back up. And I'm going to speed up the video while I finish the rest of these letters. Okay, and then once everything is dry, you can go back and outline your letters. It'll give it more of a crisp edge, or you can leave it as is too. I like to use a micron pen to outline. This one is a 0.03, and it's best to go slow with this so that way you don't make a ton of mistakes. And then if you do make any mistakes, I don't know if you can see that, but like I did right here, I didn't quite get my line where it should have been. Just take a little bit of the color and add it back in. No big deal. And then if you want to accent it any further, you could add drop shadows or you could add highlights. I always like to add a drop shadow, and I'll actually use the same gray that I used to begin with, so N95. And for drop shadows, you always want to think where the sun's coming from. So if the sun is coming and shining this way, all of your shadows would be on this side and then on the bottom of the letters. So I'm just going to add a quick shadow. Okay, so once you add your drop shadow, you could also go back through and add a highlight. And for those, I like to use the Signal, the Uniball Signo pen, just because the ink's a little bit less bleed through. I don't know the right term for it, but the white stands out a little bit more. So for the highlights, they would actually be on the opposite side of where your shadow is, because the sun is coming, your light source is coming this way, then the highlight's going to be on the opposite side of the shadow. Sometimes these Signo pens do get a little gummed up, so sometimes you gotta do a little test before you start. Otherwise you won't get a crisp white line. And I like to do the highlights only on my downstrokes. It's a little hard to add a highlight to the thinner upstrokes. Okay, so that is the finished product. So it's pretty easy to use these Tombows to blend and get the watercolor look on your letters. You can use, the Tombows are great, but you can use really any sort of water-based marker. I like also to use that was good English. I also like to use the Artist Loft pens. You can get these at Michael's, but they blend really well. They actually also work with the colorless blenders from Tombow. Just a nice little tip there. But Crayola markers work for this method too. And any sort of, well, like I said, any sort of water-based marker marker with water-based ink works for this method. Some of them dry a little bit faster though, so keep that in mind. But yeah, once you get comfortable with it, you can start doing any sort of blends. Like this one is more of an ombre, so it's got the darker blue to the lighter blue. Let's see, another example. This one is just all a blend of all different colors. You can do a galaxy effect. I don't have an example of that right here. This one is another ombre effect, so it's like a minty green into more of a forest green. I really liked how that one turned out. You can use any color combination that your little heart desires. You could do a rainbow effect. Here's another Grand Prismatic Springs. This one's more bold colors. But play around with the colors before you actually do your lettering. Maybe take a scrap piece of marker paper and play around with how the colors blend, so that way you're not surprised when you start messing around with things. Like on this one, the orange and blue just got real muddy when they blended, so they didn't blend very well. So I actually did this one again with, let's see here, with some brighter colors, and they blended a little bit better. So I got smart and I played around beforehand and came up with the order in which I wanted the colors to go. So I, made sure I did colors that would blend well together. So I always did the green, then the blue, because that would give kind of a teal color, and then I did pink after blue, which would blend into a purple color, and then the pink into, it was kind of like a orangey yellow, and that created, actually it was more of a yellow, and that created kind of an orangey effect. So that was more of the color scheme I was going for than this one. So just something to keep in mind when you're playing around with it, but the best way to learn is to just get started and go for it. So I hope you found this tutorial on how to blend colors with the Tombow Dual Brush Pens helpful. And if you have any questions, leave me a comment, and also make sure that you hit subscribe so that you don't miss any of my future videos. My next one I'm going to release is going to be a pen review on the Faber-Castell Pitt Artist Brush Pens, which is a mouthful, but those are my favorite pens, and I am so excited to do a review on those. So yeah, that's it for today. Thanks, guys.